trust her professionalism and her insight. Mrs. Smith, thank you.
First, I'd like to just say thank you for including me. Thank you so much. Thank you to the distinguished members on the panel. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I certainly don't want to repeat many of the facts that have been stated. I just want to give a little bit, some key points in regards to diversity in the workplace. Diversity, you almost can go nowhere without hearing about diversity. In more recent times, you've heard about even diversity and inclusion, and in more recent times, you've heard the word cultural competency. These things are not the same. Diversity is essential, whether you're looking for access to housing, whether you're looking for access to contracts, or you're looking for access to services and protections, if you're looking at access to education. But diversity alone by itself is never enough. It is important that we have as much of an inclusive environment as we possibly can. It's not enough to merely be invited to sit at the table if you have no input about what's being served on the menu. We need to have those kinds of dialogues, and we need to prepare ourselves so that we are competitive and that we can participate, hopefully, in those things that will go further, to meet our needs in those different areas that I mentioned. We talked about the current representation in Nassau County having 12.7% representation of blacks in Nassau County. One of the things that I also look at is that representation available and ready to be able to go into a position should it become available, should it become vacant. And one of the things that we have to look at is if you get brought into a company, if you are onboarded into a company and you only come in at the entry level and never become competitive enough in which to advance throughout that company, that diversity is really not working for you. It's really not working for the company either. So one of the things that the companies have learned, is they've learned to look into how can they get a more inclusive environment? How can they reach outside of that comfort zone? How can they include more people, and then, of course, put it all together for whatever their bottom line is. For some businesses, we know it's profit. For other businesses, we know that it could be votes. One of the lessons that has been really, really key as I've been in this field for a while now is that companies look for people who can help them to problem solve. Problem solving issues is the challenge that is before us. And with the internet and social media and other things that have made our world incredibly small, the competition no longer resides just in the persons who are in your class. The competition resides worldwide. It resides in people in other colleges, in other countries, people who come to work, people who don't come to work. We know that some companies have telecommuting, but now they have companies that beam you up like Star Trek. They have holograms of your likeness to be able to participate in meetings. And this is not something that's, like the Jetsons, that's forthcoming. This is something that's already occurring. And so we need to make sure that we have not only diversity of representation when we talk about race, but we have to make sure that our definition of diversity is not limited to race and gender. We need diversity of thought. We need diversity of how we problem solve. We need to be flexible and purposefully participatory in those things that we, okay, it's scary. We want to be purposefully participatory, and the reason is we have to get out there. We have to become involved. We have to take advantage of those initiatives, whether it's an internship, which is nice if it's paid, but also an externship, which may not pay you. But once you gain a skill, nobody can take that skill away from you. And that skill will go with you from one industry to the next. And that is how we can begin to build some intellectual confidence, if you will, so that we can make our needs known and then do those things in order to get our needs met. At that time, once we're invited to the party, so to speak, we can begin to leverage our skills that are then transferable. So I say that even though we've constantly heard we need to have a workforce that looks more like the community it serves, or even though we need to have businesses that represents more of what the community looks like, I'm telling you that just merely having representation is not enough. We need to raise the bar. Anything less than that is just laying the bar on the ground.
Thank you.
We've had a very productive conversation thus far, and one issue that we have not discussed yet, that I wish to discuss in the future, is housing. There is a housing crisis in Nassau County that has racial implications and racial underpinnings, and whether it is access to these homes and having landlords who discriminate against, at times, Section 8 vouchers, or defining what is affordable housing. Someone might say that $2,500 a month is affordable.
No, it's not.
Others would say that is not affordable. So that is another discussion that is very important that we must have. I apologize, in the program I mentioned that the next speaker is on social welfare issues is Dr. Lisa Newland. I apologize for not including that in your name. You earned that. If we have Dr. Lisa Newland, the president of the Nassau-Suffolk Association of Black Social Workers.
Thank you so much, Legislator Salages, and to all the legislators who are here, who have assembled this idea. I certainly appreciate the invitation on behalf of the Nassau-Suffolk Association of Black Social Workers. Everything that you heard spoken about from the very first opening to the last panelist has engaged areas of social work intervention. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who social workers are, what we do, why you should have them on your team, why they should be part of the discussion, and how we can collectively bring together aspects of responses. So I often like to tell my students, I teach at Malloy College full-time. I'm the chairperson of the social work department there, and in my more recent role as the president of the Nassau-Suffolk Association of Black Social Workers, we recognized that it was important to bring together seasoned professionals as well as people who are on the come up, so to speak, right? Working with our students so that they begin to understand how this organization has been around since 1968, and here in Long Island, the organization has been here since 1977. Now, maybe a little hidden at times and maybe a bit more pronounced at other times, but nonetheless, social workers have continuously addressed issues that impact the human condition from the womb to the tomb. So if you think about that, from the very beginnings of life to the ends of life, social workers engage those human conditions. When you mentioned the person who may not deal with their health issues because of their concrete needs not being met, social workers are engaging that. When you think of coming together and organizing communities for the purpose of advocating for their needs, social workers are organizing that. I could stay here for well past 4 minutes talking about the profession that I love so much, but I want to just state that we have to think about the collective impact of what's been mentioned. So I used to work as the director of a mental health clinic in the city before we moved out here in 2004, and oftentimes we realized that people's mental health issues were impacted by so many social conditions. So think about everything that we deal with, not just whatever preconditions someone may have had or history of depression or anxiety disorders that ran through their bloodline, but also looking at the impact of what's going on in our communities and how that really confronts us and helps us to, or hinders, I should say, our capacity for well-being. So you all have a general sense of what well-being means to you, right? Your certain quality of life that's important, being able to go certain places with comfort, not really being held back or marginalized in some ways, interacting with aspects of your own personal privilege. But when we think about some of these issues and how it impacts us in terms of well-being, we have to be conscious of feeling less than, feeling marginalized, pushed to the side, on the fringes of society. That kind of creates a traumatic response for many people, where we're experiencing trauma at different levels, not just because of what might happen, like I said, with mental health conditions or with any personal troubles and issues, but we also have to look at community troubles and community issues. So it is very important to think about how to engage some of these human conditions from a value system that reflects social justice, service, competence, integrity, the dignity and worth of a person, the importance of human relationships. And for all my current and former social work students in the room, they should know that those are our values, right? And it really recognizes that we have positioned ourselves as a profession to bring that perspective to everything we see, womb to tomb, on the micro level where we're working one-on-one with someone, maybe in a counseling environment, on the meso level where we're working with a group of people to either work to advocate for their needs, or a support group, let's say, for breast cancer survivors, or on a macro level where we're doing things like we're doing today by coming together, hearing the concerns of a community, figuring out how to problem solve. The last person who mentioned problem solving, social workers, we do that. But recognizing that in that problem solving, we're thinking about how we view the human condition. We're thinking about individual, social, family, community, impact on all of these issues, and working for a collective solution. So I certainly expect that our discussion and our engagement after I take my seat and whoever comes after me would really be beneficial for that purpose of advancing some common goals. So let's figure out what those common goals are. Let's be very mindful of the inclusive perspective of the persons who need the outcomes of some of these common goals. And let's be very conscious of our role, our purpose, and our practice to help achieve them. Thank you.
Our last panelist will be Mr. Aubrey Phillips, who's a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, who was a former school board member here in Almont. And about the last 4 years, he and I have been preventing a 25,000-seat soccer stadium to come to Almont. A company that recently announced that they became bankrupt and wouldn't even be able to build that 25,000-seat soccer stadium. So if it wasn't for this man here, we'd have had a half-built soccer stadium in Almont. We fought very well together, pretty good for a Haitian American, Haitian Black American, and a Haitian Grenadian American. We worked very well together. And he's going to talk about redistricting. As we know, politics and government is a way to solve some of these issues that we're talking about. But if our politicians are selecting which communities they want to represent and not the other way around, us selecting the politicians we want, we can't get anywhere. And so he's going to have a very important discussion on redistricting. Aubrey, please come forward.